You're not supposed to see it. That's the first rule. It doesn't show itself unless something is about to end. Not just a life, but a thread, a path that's run its course. And in that fragile space between moments, when breath slips and time folds, some people see it, a door where there should be none, a room that wasn't built but waits. It doesn't appear to everyone, only a few. Soldiers seconds from bleeding out, patients flatlining in operating rooms, crash victims staring through shattered windshields. 1 second it's not there, the next, flickering, like a skipped frame in a dream. You never look straight at it, only from the side, only when reality begins to blur. And yet the accounts are eerily alike. The light inside isn't natural. It pulses. The air beyond the door is thick, slow, like breathing underwater. Some say there's a sound too, a low hum, not heard, but felt. A pressure behind the eyes. And most disturbing of all, the overwhelming sense that someone or something is already waiting on the other side. For those who enter, the stories get stranger. Some remember stepping in. Others claim they didn't move at all. The room moved around them. A hospital turns to shadow. A car fills with cold. A war zone blinks, and suddenly they're elsewhere. When they return, they rarely talk about it. But something is always different. Not broken, just altered. Like a part of them didn't come back. Some believe the room is a test. Others think it's a trap. But a few whisper that it's neither. That it's a choice. An ancient invitation that can't be refused, only delayed. This isn't a story about dying. It's about what tries to interrupt death, what offers a way out, and what you might lose in the trade. Welcome to Tales from the Forbidden Library, where not every ending is final, and not everyone who comes back was meant to. The room doesn't show up for those who expect it. It doesn't answer prayers or respond to rituals. You won't find it by accident or stumble into it through curiosity. It doesn't exist in the world as we know it. At least, not until something else in you begins to let go. That's when it starts. Not with a vision or a dream, but with a subtle shift in the fabric of reality itself. A slowing, a silence, as if everything you know is pausing to make space for something older. It happens at the edge of death, not after, not before. Right at that fragile tipping point where the body begins to fail and the mind starts to loosen its grip on time. You're still breathing, barely. Your heart may still be beating, but something deeper in you knows the truth. You're about to go. And that's when it appears. Never in the center of your gaze, always in the periphery, a shape where there was nothing. A door that wasn't there a moment ago. A hallway where no hallway should be. It flickers. Not like a ghost or a shadow, but like a memory that hasn't happened yet. Some say it feels like déjà vu. Others describe it like a dream that's been waiting for you to wake up inside it. The doorway itself is different for everyone. Some see something ancient, stone arches, smoke, firelight. Others see something eerily familiar, an old school hallway, a bedroom from childhood, a hospital corridor with no end. But whatever form it takes, it always radiates the same presence. Not heat, not cold, something deeper. Like time itself is bending around it, warping the world just enough to let something else slip through. The people who survive these encounters say it draws you in, not by force, but by recognition. It feels like remembering something you never lived. A pull behind your ribs. A sensation that stepping through that door would answer a question you didn't know you were asking. And for many, that's all it takes. A step, a blink, and they're gone. No one remembers the crossing itself. No footsteps, no transition. One moment they're staring at something impossible, and the next, they're somewhere else. Inside. Surrounded by walls that don't seem physical. Lit by a glow that doesn't cast shadows. The room is not just a space. It's a presence, a consciousness, one that watches without blinking, listens without ears, judges without speaking. Inside, people report strange things, whispers with no source, visions from their past. A sensation of being studied, like something is peeling back every layer of your identity. Not just who you are, but why you are. Some feel peace, others feel dread. But they all feel one thing in common, that the room knows them, better than they know themselves. And then, as suddenly as it came, it vanishes. Time resumes. The smell of smoke returns. The sound of machines, of sirens, of shouting, the weight of the body crashing back in. They wake up, in hospitals, in wreckage, on blood-soaked ground. They are alive, but not unchanged. Those who saw the room don't talk about it easily. Not because they've forgotten, but because it doesn't fit. There are no words to explain a place that seems to exist outside of language. A door that appears only when you're not supposed to come back. A space that feels more real than life, but less solid than death. What remains is the memory, not of what was inside, but of being chosen to see it, and the haunting thought that next time, it might not let them go. There are survivors, people who swear they saw the room, stepped inside, and somehow came back. But when they speak about it, if they speak at all, it's never with clarity. Their words feel rehearsed, like they're repeating something told to them in a dream. They don't describe what they saw so much as what they felt. And even that seems to slip away as they try to recall it. They always say the same thing. It wasn't supposed to let me go. Some say that with awe, others with guilt, a few with terror, like they escaped something that didn't forget them. What unites all of them is a sense of disconnection from themselves, from the world, from time. It's as if part of them is still in that room, or perhaps something else came out in their place. Family members notice it first. The small things, a way of speaking that doesn't sound quite right, a new hesitation before familiar names, a preference for silence that never used to be there. Some survivors stop recognizing faces they should know. Others remember things that never happened, memories of places they've never been, people they've never met. And yet they swear it all feels more real than what they left behind. Then there are the patterns. Survivors tend to change their lives drastically afterward, quitting jobs, ending relationships, moving without explanation. It's not always a reaction to trauma. It's more like a course correction, as if they've returned to the wrong timeline and are trying to adjust it into place. Some even speak of missing pieces, like parts of their personality were traded away or overwritten. The room, it seems, doesn't let you leave without a cost. You don't just walk out, you're released. And that implies a decision was made by something, by someone. A few have tried to find their way back. They've returned to the scene of their near death, gone into meditative trances, starved themselves, even simulated the brink with extreme rituals. None of them ever found it again. The room opens once. That's all it gives. And then there are the warnings, those rare whispers from survivors who came back with instructions. Unspoken rules they suddenly knew, places they avoid, phrases they never say, people they stay away from without knowing why. One woman refused to ever enter a church again. Another wouldn't look into mirrors for months. A man who was revived after a car accident never flew again, not because of fear, but because they're closer up there. Sometimes the changes are physical. One case told of a man whose fingerprints no longer matched official records. Another lost a birthmark he'd had his entire life. One woman claimed her eye color darkened noticeably within days. Medical professionals dismissed it all as stress, trauma, neurological misfiring. But the survivors knew. Something subtle had shifted, something permanent. They say when you come back, You dream differently. The colors are wrong. People have the wrong names. Time jumps or loops. But worst of all is the feeling when you wake up. That quiet sense of being observed. Not watched in a paranoid sense, but studied. Like whatever you met in the room is still interested. No one knows why some are allowed to return. Maybe it's not about worth. Maybe it's not a reward or punishment. Maybe it's just curiosity, a test subject sent back into the maze to see what changes. Or maybe the room never lets go. Maybe this version of you, the one breathing now, is just a fragment, and the rest of you is still standing there, in that silent place between moments, waiting to be called back. Not everyone who enters the room comes back, but sometimes something still walks out, and that's when things get worse. There are stories, quiet ones, the kind told in late-night confessions and anonymous forums, about people who survived clinical death, but were never the same. Not in the poetic life is precious way, in the deeply unsettling way, as if the person who woke up wearing their skin wasn't fully human anymore, as if something else came back, wearing the memory of who they used to be. The changes are always small at first. A wrong smile, a phrase they never used before, a blank stare in the middle of conversation, like they're trying to remember how emotions work. People around them feel it, even if they can't name it. A sense of distance, a chill that never leaves the room. Pets behave strangely. Mirrors feel off. And more than once, someone close to them says it outright. You're not him. Or worse, you look like her, but she's not in there. Some of these post-room people retreat into isolation. Others become more social, almost too social, as if they're mimicking connection. A few have gone on to lead seemingly normal lives, blending into the world again. But there's always something beneath the surface, a slowness to their reactions, a gaze that lingers half a second too long. Some have been caught staring at walls for hours, unmoving, unblinking, as if listening to something no one else can hear. There are darker rumors, people who came back with violent tendencies they never had before, individuals who developed obsessions, rituals, markings, strange compulsions. One man began covering his mirrors with black cloth and refused to sleep indoors. Another woman spoke a language no one could identify for weeks, waking in the middle of the night to whisper it into corners of the room, and then forgetting it completely by morning. Occasionally, their bodies reject what's inside. Fevers with no cause, eyes that bleed without injury, temporary paralysis. Medical tests come back normal. But something isn't. Their presence feels like static, like the air around them doesn't flow correctly. People say it's like standing too close to a speaker, humming at a frequency you can't hear, but your bones feel it anyway. Some believe these aren't returns at all. They think the original person died in the room, and something else was allowed to step in. Not a demon, not a ghost, just an echo, a placeholder. Something the room shaped in their absence and released into the world. Maybe as a test, maybe as a message, or maybe as a way to see what it feels like to wear a soul. There are accounts of these people disappearing again, vanishing without a trace. No signs of struggle, no notes, just gone. As if whatever came back had a limited time or a mission it completed. And once it was done, it returned to wherever the room leads, or was called back to serve a different purpose elsewhere. But there's a more terrifying idea, one that rarely gets spoken aloud. What if these things never leave? What if they stay, quietly folding themselves into the world, taking jobs, forming relationships, building lives? What if the room isn't a trap or a test, but a replacement system? One that swaps pieces of humanity slowly, piece by piece, face by face. And if that's true, how would you know if someone you love isn't one of them? Worse, how would you know you're not? The most unsettling truth about the room is this: not everyone remembers seeing it. Some people brush against its edge in dreams they forget upon waking. Others experience it as a moment of silence too heavy to explain, a breath held too long, a blink that lasted longer than it should have. They don't recall a door. They don't remember stepping through anything. But something changed that day. A fracture they can't name. A shadow in their memory where no shadow should be. And then there are the patterns. People who begin to feel misaligned after close brushes with death. Not broken, not damaged, just out of place. They walk through familiar spaces that no longer feel like theirs. Conversations feel scripted. Laughter sounds a beat off. It's like life kept going without them, and they've been inserted back into a reality that isn't quite the same. Some remember standing before the room but never entering. They speak of the overwhelming urge to go forward, followed by something stronger pulling them back. A child's voice, a sudden flash of pain, a siren. They survive, but they never shake the feeling that they were supposed to go somewhere else, and that they weren't the one who made the choice. You'll hear them say, "I feel like I was meant to die that day." And maybe they were. Maybe the room had already opened, already waited, already decided. But something interfered. And in that disruption, something was left undone, unanswered. That's the part no one wants to talk about. That it's not just about who goes in or who comes back. It's about what the room wants. Maybe it isn't a gate or a trial. Maybe it's a collector, a listener, a recorder of endings. And maybe every time someone brushes against death and lives, the room learns a little more about us. Some survivors report seeing things afterward, rooms that aren't there, doorways that flicker in parking lots, an elevator that takes one floor too many. None of it lasts, none of it leaves proof. But the fear remains. Not of dying, but of almost dying. Because that's when it comes closest. When it looks at you. When it remembers. So if you've ever stared into a space that shouldn't exist, if you've ever felt that gravity shift, that unspoken invitation, that quiet pressure behind your eyes, maybe you've already seen it. Maybe you just weren't meant to remember. If this story sent a chill through you, leave a comment below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who dreams in places they've never been. Because some doors only open once. And sometimes, just looking at them is enough to change you.